Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about Colony and why I think this kind of failed and ended up being cancelled. So for those who haven't seen it, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this, but basically in the story we have it set sort of in the present day, and then there's a bunch of this extra planetary force arrives, takes over the Earth, installs a puppet government, divides everyone up into various colonies, makes people work for them on some project, mostly I think based on the moon, and no one really knows exactly what's going on. It turns out later on that it's some kind of shielding system, because these aliens or whatever this force is, has some other enemies from a different planet, and they're kind of being chased and under attack and so on. So the story centers around a particular family and their struggles with these events. Initially, at the arrival time, a bunch of when these walls were erected, suddenly these aliens or whoever they are actually sort of entered into society much earlier, and before the actual events of the thing, and they set up their shadow government beforehand. But anyway, at the time of the official arrival, when all the walls were constructed, they had a lot of families were separated and so on, and the main family here, like their youngest son, is dead on some other side of the one of these walls, and the dad's like working hard to try to find him, get him back. So that's the initial part of the thread, and then there's like all kinds of other stuff happens. The mother character ends up joining this resistance force, and then the dad character ends up becoming like kind of like a collaborator and working with their occupation forces and so on. Eventually, they are able to reunite over the course of the 3 seasons, and they escape from and just head to different, get away from the main city, and then try to go to there's another colony which is a bit more liberal, and anyway, in the end, like the actual full invasion force of the aliens arrive, and the puppet government that's based actually in Switzerland is completely wiped out, and then the story kind of ends there with the main character kind of sacrificing himself in a way to try and help his family. So anyway, and then the story just ended there, it was cancelled. So anyway, I think so the initial stuff, initially the first few episodes, that's with many of these sci-fi shows, the first few episodes were pretty interesting. The setup was very good. There was enough sort of drama and excitement to get people hooked in, and then the show sort of continued to develop along the storylines. Some of the things, I think, and as is always the case, I think the third season actually did drag out too much. I think there was really nothing much happening here. They dragged out the story a lot, whereas in the first 2 seasons more things actually happened in the season to actually propel the story forward. I think that this is generally like something that happens with a lot of shows, TV shows, especially in the science fiction genre, where they have a good idea and they try to get as much sort of viewer time, ad time out of it, and then in the end, it kind of the story suffers. There's often this like lack of depth to the story, which kind of is belied by the fact that they have to drag the episodes out. They don't have much of a story. They don't have more of a story, so then they end up dragging out what they do have, and it takes them too long to kind of propel, and then they kind of put everything interesting right at the end to try to make you want to watch the next season, and so on, and to make you watch through the first that season, to watch every single day and then go for the next season, and it's very difficult to kind of maintain any kind of flow. I think that we could have found out much more about the main first occupying aliens or whoever they are sooner, and then with the enemies that came, their enemies who arrived and so on. We don't know anything about them, and the story just ended. So it was definitely some of the characters were really good. I mean, the main family, the two main leads were really good there. I think one of the collaborated governors, like the main guy, they did it well, and the various other people who were sort of involved with the occupation from the human side. I think those characters were well developed, and um, their motivations and so on are kind of understandable. I think the reason this thing failed was, well, multiple things. One was the dragging of the story. The other thing, something else I didn't like. I mean, I don't know if the decision to cancel had already been made at this point, but the youngest son from the family, they rescued him in the end and were able to escape. The whole like driving thing was about him for a large part of the story. And then, towards the end of the third season, they just killed him off. He just hit a stray bullet, hits him, and he dies. It's it was kind of, it just looks really, I don't know, pointless and silly. And I understand that obviously, like, if you want to make something realistic, obviously not everyone who you're trying to save can be saved and whatever. But the whole point was to have this kid saved. And so if one of the parents had died trying to protect the kid, I would still be unhappy, but that would be kind of acceptable, I would say. But I didn't like that idea, and it seems kind of weak just to do something like that. The other thing is, nowadays I think it's hard. I mean, they tried to do a mixture of between sort of, this trying to start off with a story just down to earth, just with a regular family and their struggles from this event, and then in the end, the story suddenly expanded, like mainly I think in the third season, to this kind of galactic scale thing with spaceships and stuff, and that kind of was kind of strange. That we had an enemy, we had something going on. They could have investigated that. I don't know why they had to sort of throw in this other alien force and spaceships and laser battles and stuff. It kind of just made the purpose strange. Also, we already had they had these like collaborating army of people who had kind of joined to police the occupied people, and then later they added in a whole other force, another paramilitary kind of group, or just under the central command. It just got confusing, and I think that it would have been better if they had just sort of progressed the story carefully, but the key being progression of the story rather than just rehashing, and dragging things out. I think that this is why already people generally don't watch science fiction much. They don't want to see. They're not that interested in futuristic settings or aliens or spaceships, and not as interested as they used to be in the 90s and the early 2000s. There's generally, I think, worldwide, I mean, our culture is sort of much more introspective now, and so this is, I think, why a lot of science fiction has problems, unless it's related to Star Wars, which is sort of a cultural phenomenon with this, which is like an extreme sort of all this various multitude of aliens and shapes and sizes and spaceships and galaxies and battles, and that's an exception. So which is why, sort of, as I spoke about on my other video about Mandalorian, where it can be successful and popular and people want to watch more of it and demand more seasons and so on. Something like Colony, when you want to start something new, there's always, you need to keep the audience interested, and if you're going to start with just a day-to-day mundane sort of normal story with this extra level of like being under occupation from some unknown unseen aliens, then we need to develop those aliens more. We need to know more about them. I mean, they were starting to do it, and it was really intriguing to know like who the hosts were and what exactly what they were. I mean, towards the end we found out that they were like a consciousness inside a computer system, and their actual bodies were just basically avatars. And then in Colony, you had so much time spent like with this group in the forest or whatever, this like ragtag bunch of resistance people, and they captured one of them, and like it was so dragged out. I think they really shouldn't have wasted so much time like that. I don't know why there's a problem now with science fiction in general, why we can't make new compelling stories like they used to do, like with Star Trek. Like the original Star Trek was it was set far in the future, and it was different to being down on Earth. And then we had the spin-offs from there, which came several years later, but they were able to maintain a fan base and have some kind of interesting stories and depth amongst all the series, all the way until sort of the end of Voyager, which we just can't get anymore. So it's so difficult to start something new, and it's clear, like, I don't know if it's because there's I mean, I think there are many talented people in the industry. I just don't know why, they're not able to make a compelling enough story that a lot of people will want to watch. I mean, the other thing I'd say, something more down to earth sort of thing would be, it wasn't so family oriented as such, but Stargate SG-1, you know, this show, it was set in the present time. They had all the alien science fiction, all that kind of stuff, spaceships and whatever, but it was developed very slow, and they did end up going to this kind of crazy galactic scale of problems. But they were able to develop it gradually and slowly, and even have cast changes in the middle of it, but still there was a depth to it and a logic to it, which I think all these new shows, just for whatever reason, the newer ones, they just can't maintain. So I mean, I don't know if there's like any other kind of reason why this was cancelled. Like maybe the ratings were good, but like the studio didn't like it or something like that, or for whatever reason, I don't know. But even if that is the case, I mean, still, this wasn't like an amazing show. This was just something that you could sit and watch and just let it play through, and it was kind of like if you're completely bored and you had nothing else to do, you just leave it on and just watch it. It's not something that you'd be like, yes, I can't wait for next week's episode. It's amazing, which used to be the case with science fiction in the past, no, at least for me anyway. I just sat and watched it because I had nothing else to do at the time. I was able to binge watch it, but it was it was such a good premise and such a good sort of setup, and then it just all kind of just like got diluted, and in the end it got cancelled. And I don't know how, even if it hadn't been cancelled, like I don't know how much more they could have done with the story if there had been a season 4, for example. So yeah, I think those are basically my kind of gripes about the whole thing. Obviously there's no perfect answer to this question, but I hope some of my thoughts kind of are similar to what you guys might have thought about it, or hope maybe give you some other points to think about. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one.